Hello and welcome to the AI Digest. My name is Joaquin and I am your host. With me today is Tek Raj Chhetri, and he is the founder of Care Nepal. Um, Tek Raj, would you be able to give us a little bit of background on Care Nepal?
Yeah, sure. CARE Nepal, it stands for Center for Artificial Intelligence Research Nepal. As the name says, it's a research organization that I started at the end of my PhD. So, the main objective of this research center is to educate Nepalese youth in research, particularly artificial intelligence research, and conduct research in the field of artificial intelligence and its application. When I say artificial intelligence research, we focus more on responsible artificial intelligence because nowadays everyone is using AI, and whether you like it or not, you are part of it. So there's a need to educate people, uh, to let them know that the negative consequences it can bring, and also to train the next generation to build ethical and a trustworthy system. So that's the main purpose of Care Nepal. And
How,
it,
how
it
appropriate how appropriate that this is an organization that you founded, but your day job is a postdoctorate researcher at the University of Southampton. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you're doing there?
yeah, sure. At the University of Southampton, I'm working as a postdoctoral researcher, as you said, in the area of data privacy. Particularly, I'm working as a part of Upcast project, where like building systems that comply by GDPR and other privacy constraints that anyone and user may enforce or would like to have. So, in a way, they're also here trying to build a system that's trustworthy and abides by all those regulations. So, how does my work link with Care Nepal? So during my PhD, I did explain my one of the component of my work, other than data privacy, was also an explainable AI, and where I use knowledge graph based technology with deep learning based technologies to improve not just the prediction but also to make it explainable. When I say explainable, it's a factual explanation by the use of knowledge graph, because anyone can generate natural language text, but is it factual information? Is it conveying the correct information as it should? So that's how it's linked. So
So your expertise lies in artificial intelligence, data privacy, semantics, and IoT, the
yeah,
Internet of Things, right?
so my background is very diverse. During my master's studies at the University of Tartu, I started working on autonomous driving. So I worked for more than a year, and also in the industry, I did a little bit, I think around 6 to 7 months in the self-driving car. At the same time, I was working in the cloud computing research, so like in parallel. And I was also teaching parallel programming, so it's very diverse background, I should say. And the PhD was a little bit different, but I think it's good because when you work in different domains, you get all those knowledge from different areas that you can combine and see the area where you are working now from the different perspective.
I think it's an extremely healthy and human thing to explore and then build 1 to 2 areas of specialization.
Yeah.
And I think you've gotten a really good broad area of understanding around how these things work. And now that you're specializing in how to make responsible, trustworthy, explainable AI systems, the work that you did is super relevant, and it gives you more of an imagination around this changing landscape, right?
Yeah, I think those different areas that I work on was very helpful to see things differently and to do things differently. And I think everyone should try it.
So Today we're going to be talking about how do we build trustworthy, responsible AI
Mhm.
systems, but distributed systems.
Yeah.
Would you be able to define what it means to be trustworthy?
Okay. Trust is a very hard to define, I would say, because it's very subjective. But even though it's subjective, like there's a standard, I think everyone would agree, any system that's reliable. When I say reliable, not just in terms of doing its job, because one thing that we want is like from the machine perspective, like you want your system to be reliable, do things as it does. The other thing that we are talking here, when the trust component that we are talking here is like it's not doing harm to normal people. It it abides by the societal norms, which is one of the major concern with the generative AI today. So how do we build a system? Because how do we build a system that abides by all those norms and does not do not do any harm to normal people? So when we talk about trustworthy system, I think it's getting more, the trust issue is getting more highlighted because of the generative AI, but there's more to that. Because even previously, there was an issue of trust. Not many people were aware. That's a different thing. But the issue has been always there, and people have been working on it. It's just that it got with the generative AI, it gets uh, into the news and more hype because the risk is there.
A trustworthy system is like a trustworthy person. You can
Yes.
rely on them. They'll tell you the truth. They don't hide things from you. They're
Yeah.
transparent. Okay. So what does it mean to be responsible? I mean, you said in trustworthy, there's like a layer of predictability and reliability, but what does it mean to be responsible?
Uh, Trust is a component of responsible system, because responsible AI, a responsible system has many different principles, and trust is one of the part of those responsible systems. So it's if you see from the, it's like responsible ecosystem, I would say. uh, then there's one component called trust, another privacy and security, and another one accountability. So there are different principles, so trust is just one part of that.
And can you give a little bit of a descriptor for what a distributed system is?
Yeah. So to all the people who are not into computer science, if you are using internet, that's a distributed system. It just means it is distributed across different locations. There are different computers connected by some form of connection, which we call network in the computer science terminology. Internet is also one of the network, like it's the biggest network. So that's the distributed systems, just in a layman term. There are formal definitions which says, okay, multiple computers connected together, doing all those processing in a distributed manner, uh, those kinds of definition. But I think just the layman definition would work here. So
Social media would be an example of a distributed
yeah.
system with everybody having their phone and sending out messages or calling each other.
Yeah, yeah, that's also an example, but people don't realize it's distributed because they just use it as a normal thing.
So now that we've kind of defined some of these things,
Mhm.
can you tell us a little bit about the concerns with privacy, PII,
Mhm.
GDPR, like these acronyms
Yeah,
that
yeah,
are
sure.
so charged but relevant?
Mhm. Yes, like you said before, like all those trust, person would not say do things you can rely on them. Let me build on that. For example, Internet of Things that we are that's around now everywhere. Even if you don't know like what Internet of Things. Uh, It's okay. If you are using mobile, you are part of it. So using a mobile phone, you are generating some data. Maybe you are using Google Maps, you are sharing your location. uh, those kinds of data are personally identifiable data. So what does it mean? Any data that can be linked to you, any person. So it doesn't have to be just your personal details about you. It can be anything like IP address, for example. It can be linked to you. So those kinds of data are personally identifiable data. Now, sometimes when I speak with people, they say, "Ah, my data are already out there. Why does it matter?" Because the way other person is using your data is a concern. For example, sometimes you see you are watching some videos and all of a sudden you get advertisement relevant to you. So how is that happening? Because they are using your behavioral data, how you are using the social media. So those data, when used in a positive way, it helps us. For example, Google Map, you're using your location data, it is helping you. That is the positive side of technology. So everything has two sides, like the positive side and the negative side. Those are the positive side. But then there's a negative side that's a concern. Like the world are not full of good people, so there's a negative side. So people misuse those data and it can cause harm. So you could lose your job. You could people may get into like other kinds of like mental illness, those kinds of harm. Like, and it's just one of the small problem. Like uh, the bigger on a bigger scale, if you want to know like to what extent the harm can be, it can compromise democracy. You may see how people may using your social media data, they may do the targeted advertisement, false advertisement that you may be victim of, and you may vote for whatever people who may not be good the for your country. So those kinds of harm. And in order to protect this kind of things, just about you, and also any misuse of personally identifiable data, European Union on 2018 implemented a law that is called GDPR, which is a data protection law. So what does it say? You need to obtain consent. There are six legal bases: contract, public interest, but mostly you need to obtain consent or the permission from the person whose data you are using, and you need to tell him like why you are using asking your data. You need to tell the purpose of processing and what are the operations that you are doing, and you need to abide by that. So if you are not, you'll be liable for fine, which is very high, 20 million euro or 4% of your GDP in the preceding years, whichever is higher. That may seem a lot, but for a companies like Google and Facebook, if they get 20 million, that's nothing for them.
So, PII, can we look at that as a digital fingerprint? You know, everything that you touch, you leave a mark on
Yes.
the activity that you do in the internet, right? I mean, you leave a trace of breadcrumbs of all the
Hmm.
things that you've touched, videos you've watched, social
Yeah,
media posts that
you
you've
can
done.
look in that way as well, because at the end, what you are leaving is a footprint, and people are misusing it.
And as you said, it can be used for good. So,
Hmm.
you know, I share my geolocation so
Hmm.
that I have there's a pin in the map that shows where I am, and
Hmm.
I want to go to another location and
Yeah.
use the satellite systems to tell me, okay, go 1 mile this way, take a
Hmm.
right over here, and then there's the bakery. I can buy some bread. But people track where I've gone, where I'm going, how I'm doing, the rate at which I walk, where I live, and like you said, people can misuse that to know who I am, how old I am, my name, my address, my spending habits, my behavior habits, and they can scam me. right?
Yes.
Maybe some people they target elderly people because they're easier to trusting
Hmm.
some outside party, or there's many scams that are getting even worse where people call you and they say that your family member is sick or there's an emergency. Can you pay a fee so that they can get better or we can take care of them?
Hmm.
So yeah, I hear you. I mean, it's a fast changing world, and the fact that generative AI is helping people emulate
Yeah.
the appearance or the sound of somebody else. It's such a like, what can you trust now? It's not a trustworthy system anymore when
No,
actors with malicious intents can
mhm.
pretend to be something else.
Yeah, it's as you said, it's fast, like world is changing. And for example, I'm a researcher, right? I work on, and as like other people like me work on developing those technology to make our life simpler, like simpler, and to help every people. But then there are people misusing it. So I think that's how it is. There's always bad people, but we should not stop working and look for ways to counter people, because you cannot, if someone intentionally wants to do bad thing, you cannot stop him.
But
All you can do is uh, be prepared for those kinds of people.
these negative interactions
Mhm.
and malicious intents, they're a hindrance to the data-driven economy, right? I mean, we want to have
Yes.
a trustworthy system where we
Mhm.
can do transactions and messages, have conversations. Uh, but can you tell us a little bit more about those hindrances and
Yes. For example, let's take an example of IoT, since we have been discussing IoT. IoT are used now almost everywhere, and it's expected to have an economic impact of, I think, around 12 trillion or something like that, 5 to 12, according to McKinsey, by 2030 or 2050. I'm not sure about the exact date, but you see the scale now. That means IoT will be deployed almost everywhere. Your vehicle, your homes, and those data will be used to simplify your lives or whatever thing the company is doing. Now, in order to make use of those data, there's a law, GDPR. Okay, company says, I want to use your data. You says, okay, I have the data, but when you share the data, that's just a small portion, small part of GDPR. Because even if I give you permission, you let's assume for a moment that you are using the data for the purpose that you are saying, and only the data that you requested. But then that's not enough. You also have to demonstrate that you did what you said. And
Mhm,
that's the biggest problem, because now, why why do you have to do that? Because I, people may say, people may lie, and if
mhm.
you are not able to prove, it's a law, right? Like any, if you go to court, you may say something, but you have to prove you have the evidence. Same thing with the goes with GDPR. And since it started in 2018, companies are not still prepared for that. We're not prepared for that, and are still not, because only 57, according to 2019 study, only 57% of European companies are fully compliant. So that means they're still companies, and the biggest challenge is like they have to understand law,
Mm.
the interpretation of GDPR, and build systems to avoid by those things. So there are two things. One, the system that you are building should already avoid by GDPR, and also support your the GDPR compliant processing or sharing of data. So that is one of the biggest hindrance. And the other aspect is on the data itself. Since the data is getting generated like in an exponential manner, and it's coming from all different sources like variety and the volume at which it's being generated. There's an issue, like how do you make sure those data are meaningful and are of quality. For example, three-fourths of IoT projects are just failing because of the data quality issue. And again, there's GDPR, there's data quality issue, and all this trust issue, all putting it together.
We have a
So
lot of issues.
yeah, to
um,
tackle.
so the violations for GDPR, you said you need to get consent. Some
Mhm.
people don't get consent, right, when they're collecting data. Um, what are other types of violations when not abiding by GDPR?
So one is like if they are not following, because you said like they are not taking consent, because if those data do not fall into the category of personally identifiable data, there's no need to take consent. Uh, and because consent is one of the six legal bases, there is also public interest, which, for example, you got into an accident, and there's other person, and he if he wants to use your data, he can't obtain a consent, because depending on your state, right? In that case, he may use those information if available. So in that case, that's also perfectly fine to process your data, but that's just one of the side, one of the case. The other kinds of violation is that I have observed is like they are not avoiding the GDPR itself, because GDPR is a set of law. It's not just obtain consent and that's you are done. No, first thing you obtain your consent, and then the other violation is like not
Protect
maintaining appropriate level of security, technical and organizational measures to safeguard your data, doing processing more than what you said you will do, not being able to demonstrate what you are doing, just again falls into the accountability category. These are the major ones.
selling it as well, right? I mean, you
Mhm.
say,
Yeah.
"Oh, we'll use it to provide a personalized customer experience,"
Mhm.
and then you go and you sell it to somebody who's interested in that kind of customer
Yeah.
demographic.
Unethical processing of data.
Mm. And the lack of understanding, the lack of governance, lack of adoption uh,
Mhm.
for GDPR. Before we started the recording, you mentioned that that kind of has led to the AI Act, and it's the first time that I hear about it. Can you tell
Mhm.
me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. AI Act is, I think AI Act is more than GDPR, because GDPR mostly focus on data,
Mhm.
mostly personally identifiable data, but AI Act focus more on algorithm aspect, particularly those deep learning kinds of algorithms, and how it is being applied. Because as you said before, at the starting, like with all those generative AI, people using other voiceover, it's hard to trust, right?
Mhm.
And so to protect that kind of thing, so how you build model, at the starting, at the beginning I said, when I was talking about Care Nepal, I said we want to do responsible AI research, right? So how you want to apply artificial intelligence in a manner that abides by all those laws, or it doesn't harm people. So EU AI Act is particularly designed to safeguard uh, or privacy, or like the prevent the negative harm from the application of generative AI, or anyone who is building AI Act should abide by. For example, I may build an AI model to make prediction based on your maybe genomic data, maybe modify the genomic data and do all kinds of things, but that's illegal according to law. So to prevent those kinds of things, AI Act is there, and I think it's an interesting uh, and it's I think it's an interesting act, because With great power comes great responsibility, I would say, with the AI. But then let's see how it gets implemented in practice.
I mean, the technology is changing so quickly that it cannot be understood fully. And
Yes,
even if you try to understand a static snapshot of that, by the time that you understand this little piece, we're already like five pieces ahead. Um, I saw online that there was this famous podcaster, Joe Rogan. Um, his voice, his body, someone took some sort of algorithm, some sort of set of artificial machine learning techniques, and they replicated his body, his voice, and then they just gave it a script, and the bot kind of reproduced what the script was saying in the voice of that person, and he has spent a career building his brand, building credibility, and then people in the snap of a finger are now able to misuse his position of authority, of credibility, to
yes,
promote lies, promote products. Um, and how do you track those people? How do you hold them accountable, and how do you prevent that from happening? I mean, everybody has
yeah.
access to this in their phone now.
Yeah, yeah. This is what I was saying before. Even with the GDPR, I mean, like you said, if I'm spending all those years or anyone doing hard work building reputation, someone may use your data for something that you did not do, manipulate it, and all of a sudden you lose all your credibility. So researchers like me out there in the world are working to make all those AI or any other system safe, secure. Now, as you said, I agree with what you said. Like technology is changing so fast, it's very hard to understand all the uh, details. Like what are the, because there's two kinds of harm I see. One is intentional harm, that people are misusing all those AI models developed for the positive cause. And the other one is unintentional harm. Sometimes you develop model for something and it also generates the side effect, like the medicine. Y- you are developing medicine for something, but then there's always side effect. And then but then that doesn't mean you stop working on that. You continue to work, improve to minimize that thing. That's what researchers are doing. So how I see this AI Act is that it is there to prevent all those misuse by other people. Because if you see any other researchers, if you go talk to any other researchers, the anyone working in any research areas, if you ask them, why do you build this thing, they say because it will help people or something like that. They are not saying that I'm building this so that someone can misuse it. But there are people misusing it. I think there will always be bad people. And how do we track it? I think we try to regulate it, and that's where the law comes into play.
I mean, you can't possibly know ahead of time
Hmm.
when you create something what it can be used for. I mean, you create it for one purpose, but
Yeah.
it can be that purpose can be corrupted.
Yes.
Um, so okay, you said something earlier that was like a big deal. You said
Mhm.
4 or 8 or 13 trillion dollars is spent on developing these decentralized, distributed,
The economic potential of Internet of Things, 5 to 12 trillion USD.
and
The,
this goes back to the topic of building a responsible, trustworthy, distributed IoT system.
yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit
Yeah,
more about
sure.
your experience with that?
Yeah. So you see the economic impact and the positive side of IoT. So in the future, like even now, the amount of sensors being deployed, used everywhere, for example, smart homes. So if you don't build a system that's trustworthy, that people can trust, that
Mhm.
does only things that's supposed to do, and not taking your data and manipulating in some way, that economic benefit we will not get, because if people are not deploying or using all those IoTs, there's no data. And when there's no data, I mean, there's no data driven economy. So that is where this trustworthy systems comes into play. You need to build a system that people can trust. uh, it's not just about AI. Even if you don't use AI, you can just manipulate the data. For example, if I get some information about you, I don't have to use AI. I can just use that information to, maybe I can call your friends and say this is this some information, and then if I'm saying everything about you correct, they will say okay, it might be true, and
Mm,
they may fall victim of that. And that's just a small portion. Like what you do at home, let's take an example of smart uh, home systems, right? That those kinds of systems are there to simplify our life and make our life easier. Now, if there's a system that's like there to simplify our life, but if that system, like if we are taking data from that system and manipulating it, like what you do in at your home is your personal thing. Now if I'm getting that data outside in a public, so imagine the consequences it can bring.
there was there was a very big lawsuit. There was this young hacker, young computer programmer, that he found an exploitation in a children's toy. It was like a little toy where kids could take pictures and they can upload it and their parents can see the pictures. But this toy was amassing information on the parents' income, the
Yeah.
parents' personal information, the kids' personal information, and holding in massive servers just tons of children's photos. And one guy went to the website and found a way to do an SQL injection,
Mhm.
some sort of
Yeah.
attack, and he downloaded everything. And he said, "I downloaded everything, and I barely know how to program. How
Mhm.
is this safe? How is this trustworthy? And who in the right mind thought it would be okay to do something like this?"
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, now and like coming forward, as like the growth of data, as people will be using more those technologies, I think people there will be cases like that. But we need to be prepared. Like when I say we, especially people working in these domains, should ensure that those kinds of things will not happen. But then that doesn't mean it will not happen, because it's like the same thing in the society, right? People, uh, like uh, in the society, you say you don't hurt people, you always help people, but there are still people they uh,
Bad things happen.
harm.
Bad things
Yeah,
happen.
that things happen, but then we need to act and make sure that there are things in place like the laws. If you kill someone, you'll go to jail. There are police to take action and a court to take action on you. Yeah, we need to have something on uh, the technology as well. So
Yeah, that's a good
one thing
example.
I would like to add here, because if someone is having control over the data, someone can gain access to all the data about you. They can control you, and this is a very big thing and very dangerous thing.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that? I mean, your name, your last name, your passwords,
Mhm.
your bank account, what like social media, what else?
Yeah, though those are the direct details. For example, let me tell you the way people can track you. For example, let's say you have got certain disease, and if someone got access to some hospital database, where your data is present, not necessarily your name, but then I can take all those information, let's say disease information and the postcode. So what I'm doing is like taking all those data and narrowing it down. And if you at the end you will reach to certain geographic location, and if there's one or two people, you already identify who that person is. So that is what technology can do. So people see when that's why GDPR says like anything that can be linked to you either directly or indirectly, because I can aggregate your information, taking maybe social media data with other data, and come up with new insights that you may even don't know using all those technologies.
I mean, I would like to believe that there's more good people than bad people in the world, but honestly, I don't think, like, based on what we see on the news, I don't think that's what is shown. But I would love to see the idea of this distributed system being implemented in supply chain management, like
Yeah,
keeping track of things moving from one place to the other. That's really useful.
yeah,
The medical information, as you said, I
mhm,
want to be able to get an X-ray and then have that be in my doctor's office
mhm,
and have him give me a recommendation on what I should do
yeah,
instead of like physically carrying a document or artifact and bringing it to each location that I'm going to, um, or even for college. I
yeah,
would like to be able to represent myself and take my academic career and then pass it to another academic institution, transfer everything seamlessly,
mhm,
and not fear that somebody's going to know I got a C in biography or,
mhm,
or biology. Like,
yeah,
you know, um, so how do we enable that? How do we enable a safe future? I know you're saying we
mhm,
can't stop fires from happening. We need firefighters. We can't
mhm,
stop murder from happening. We need police officers.
yeah,
But there are fire codes and there
mhm,
are
yes.
patrol officers making sure things are okay.
Mhm. So how do we do that? We work. That's the only thing. So when I say we, everyone doing research or working in those domains should work with a good intention. Yes, there can be sometimes unintended consequences. That's always there. But uh, once you know something happens or something like there's some side effect, you try to minimize and you build systems. uh, and the kind of work like the example that I gave you about narrowing down all those aggregating different data, that's what I'm doing now. So I'm fortunate to say this, that I'm contributing a little bit to this cause. uh, and there are many other researchers and people around there working on these things, making sure we build things that can be reliable and trustworthy, and not just from the system perspective but also from the societal norms. That's why you see the rise in responsible AI research, human-centered AI research, and those kinds of research centers being established, for example, in MIT, Stanford. They have a dedicated research studying all those analyses. Even OpenAI, they are supporting researchers to understand their system, because there has to be collective effort. Uh, if there's something bad, that doesn't mean you completely disregard it. You try to improve it in a collective manner. I think that's what everyone should do, and then we will have systems that can be trusted.
And in the context of semantics, what
Hmm.
role does that play? Um, let's talk about agriculture. I mean,
Hmm.
um, in the previous episode, I talked to Dr. Ronak Panchal, and we
Hmm.
spoke about how efforts are being made to incorporate smart devices, sensors that can keep track of humidity, temperature, and other pertinent information to release water or maybe shield the crop or do some sort of auxiliary support system to be using resources more efficiently and more effectively for a better yield. Um, how do we enable that using semantics?
Yeah, it's a very good point that you brought up, and thank you for that. For example, if we look into current mm, most of the machine learning or deep learning paradigm, it's mostly based on correlation, just the statistical analysis. So what it is lacking is the exact thing that you said, semantics. So the understanding of core understanding of the meaning of what is being said, and this is applicable not just on the deep learning side. It is also important in the context of IoT. So let me start with IoT and come back to uh, internet of like deep learning. For example, let's take a temperature. uh, I think there are 3 4 different scales that you can measure temperature, like Fahrenheit, degree Celsius, and Kelvin scale. Now, let's say you are at the hospital and there's a sensor monitoring the temperature and regulating some, I don't know, oxygen or something like that. Now, if there's a system that's taking that value and releasing that oxygen, which was supposed to like be measured in Kelvin scale, but someone says like, okay, it's degree Celsius. So, what will be the consequences? People may die because there's a difference in those understanding. So that kind of thing can be enabled by semantic technology using knowledge graphs and ontologies. So you can make sure that what you want to say is conveyed and the machine understands the exact same thing. So this is where the context part, the one that I was explaining, is like the contextual information. That's with the
Semantic
internet.
technologies allow you to build that explainability element or
Yes.
capability or feature
Yeah.
into the system, right?
Yes, and also it also provides reasoning. For example, we as a human, we reason like, okay, if this happen, this may happen, like if then kind of thing. Those kinds of reasoning. People are working on the deep learning aspect also to incorporate these kinds of reasoning, and there's a uh, rise in new AI paradigm called neuro symbolic AI, which combines those semantic technology and the deep learning based paradigm or the neural network based paradigm. So this is where semantics comes into play. Now, in the case of deep learning, where it will be helpful, I can maybe talk about my studies where we did. It was also fortunately in the agricultural domain. So what we did was we combined those semantic based approach and also deep learning based approach, where you use computer vision to analyze the disease. So we are doing disease prediction for the cassava disease. So here it is not important cassava, it can be anything. So
Hmm.
what we did is like we took the best of both worlds, deep learning, all this pattern learning capability, and also the semantics, because with the semantic technology, it's human centered. There's a human in the loop. So what we did was like we discussed with experts, agricultural experts. For example, if you have been working in a field for 10 years, that means something, right? We get
Hmm.
we got those kinds of information modeled in ontology, and then uh, we did reasoning. So then you get the prediction. Then we see, okay, we combine those predictions, and then we saw improvement in the accuracy. That's one aspect. The other aspect we did improve was the explainability. Now, using generative AI, you can generate explanations. That's good. Even before that, you can use all those classical NLP and generate the explanations, textual explanation, like using BERT and other kinds of transformer-based models. But
So,
then, question is that explanation factual?
mm,
Can it be relied on?
mm,
As you know, the semantic technology, like particularly the knowledge graph, that holds the factual information, and if you are generating explanations based on that, it can be relied on. And we also did this user based studies along with the performance, and particularly with non-experts, and they found that it's very helpful and trustworthy, like can be relied on. So that's the positive aspect.
So you worked on a project in the agricultural space, and you had a team of experts, and then you had some sort of data collection
Mm-hmm.
mechanism, right? That was focused on like what, taking snapshots or taking samples of some sort of time-based
Mm-hmm.
sensor.
So we use the public data set, but that was collected by farmers taking pictures from the
Okay.
farms. So that were the vision data set. For the sensor data set, there was no public data set available, but taking those information from expert, we did simulate the sensor information, sensor
Okay.
data.
But really, when you say the statistical analysis
Mhm.
and the knowledge representation,
Mhm.
like neurosymbolic, combining a hybrid
Mhm.
approach of
Yeah.
statistics and knowledge representation or symbolic, um, the statistic is the drip, the drip of information that you get based on time, right? Like
Yeah.
I put a thermometer
Mhm.
outside. In the morning, it's going to be warm. In the afternoon, it's going to be hot. In the evening, it's going to be cold.
Mhm.
Um, and then I'm going to track that over time to see how temperature changes. And I track that throughout the year. And statistically, I'm going to get patterns, right? That's
Yeah.
the statistical approach to that. But then I can go into the knowledge area, and I can look at, as an expert, I studied weather, I studied meteorology. I know that there's a El Nino or La Nina changes in wind, or there's a snowstorm coming. I can combine that observatory qualitative knowledge with that pattern that's been tracked with the thermometer to combine it into a more robust,
Mhm.
explainable system, right? Because
Yeah,
that's
robust predictions as well as like generate. You can use that information to generate more reliable explanation of why things are happening. Because there's one aspect of making predictions, and the other aspect is like conveying that prediction information. So in our case, we did convey the information regarding the disease, like what is the consequences that disease can bring, to what extent that disease can cause harm. And that's, I think, very important, because if you see the users of the technology, more people who are using those any technology are not expert on that. So it is very important we convey any information to all those users in a way that's understandable to them, and also that's factual and correct.
well, a smart system, an intelligent system, a trustworthy system is accessible. It shows the work, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't just say 2 plus 2, 4. 128 times 365 equals blank. I mean, it should show you how it computes
Yeah.
through those sequences of tasks,
Mhm.
even if it's mathematical or logical or whatever, right?
Yeah. So at this point, I think we also need to highlight the work that's being done on the deep learning side, like trying to understand all those explanations. For example, SAP and line-based approaches. Those are mathematical approaches that uh, takes all those feature importance, take all those feature. For example, if I'm doing some disease prediction based on image, it try to see which part of that image it's taking the feature, we say feature importance, like those features, and then that is impacting the prediction. So they are there, but that's not very comprehensible to normal users. For us, yes, we it's very helpful, those kinds of things are there, but then if you want to connect to the broader audience, we need to do more than that.
So, hmm, can you give me a bit more of a deeper dive on neural networks and deep learning and the differences between them and the pros and cons?
Mhm. Uh, Pros, I would say its ability to learn all those patterns based on the data, whatever you provide.
Statistical.
That is the pro. That is one of the greatest pro that I would say.
Which
If you
one?
ask,
Which one?
that's for the neural network.
And that one is based on statistical or symbolic?
That's based on the statistical.
Okay.
So this old classical old AI, which not many people are aware of, because when we say AI, most of the newer generation just think of machine learning, deep learning, which is not. The old classical symbolic based approaches with semantic technology is what they are useful is the positive, like the key thing is like the fine grained representation of the knowledge, and also the reasoning, like you do in the real world, and all those consequences if then kind of thing. The support for that is the key advantage there.
That's for neural networks.
No, this is for the old classical like semantic wave technology or symbol based.
And okay, I'm sorry, I'm very confused in this area. So neural networks is more statistical driven, and
Yes,
then the semantics is symbolic driven.
yes.
And what is deep learning?
Or
What is
deep
that?
learning is just a paradigm, like it's like you have AI. This is old classical like expert system based AI, like which you call like symbol based, and there's a machine learning, and machine learning has like subtypes like deep learning, which is based on like neural networks, and that's it.
Okay,
So
deep learning is a
when you
classification
say deep
technique.
learning, because you have multiple layers, more than two, like I don't know how many layers you can, as many layers you can have. So the deep in the deep learning is like more layers, neural network layers.
Okay, I see. Do you have any thoughts on, for the audience on how they can preserve their identity, how they can be remain private, and for people constructing systems, how they can make them. Well, let's do that one first, and then
Mhm.
uh, move on to the last.
Yeah, regarding how you protect your information, do not share anything randomly. Once it's out there in the internet, you don't know how many places it is, and you may never be able to track it, like get it down, because that's internet is big. Once something is out there, it's out there. So be cautious of what you're sharing. And if you are in EU, Europe, I think it's not just in Europe. Even in California, there's California some CCPA, some act, same as GDPR, and be sure to check out those laws because they are designed for you. And knowing that, you can all take benefit of that. For example, if any company, because one key thing, for example, in GDPR is a right to delete your thing. If you say, if you as a company are holding my data, I say, okay, I no longer want to share my data, remove my data. You need to delete all the information about me. So having information about, you don't have to go deep dive into all those law, but having basic information should already help you. Because if I know, I can ask you to remove my data and you have to comply, otherwise you will get penalized, you'll do that. So even if I don't have that information, I will not tell you. You are not deleting, you are probably misusing.
And for the people that are building systems that are part of the IoT space, integrated into this gigantic web of
Mhm.
devices. Yeah, what is your recommendation for them to have a more successful outcome,
Yeah,
incorporating
for
ethics or
mhm.
what?
If you are dealing with IoT, uh, as per my research so far, other than all those privacy thing, the other major reason why IoT projects are failing is because of the data quality issue. Like three-fourth of project, that's a huge. So be sure to check out semantic web because it can help you there. Uh, I have a paper. It's been quite a long now in review. Hopefully that will be out soon. So then you may be able to read it how you can do. But there are already other papers that you can look up, and you should get a glimpse of how you can benefit from semantic web in those IoT environment dealing with all those interoperability issue, data quality issue.
Tactically, how would you go about enriching the data context? Are there any particular methodologies that you've experimented with or researched?
Yeah, in the context of IoT, we the study that I was talking about, we look into the data. How do we ensure data quality? I think you can already use SACL uh, constraint from SACL constraint defining because when you are deploying some sensor, you know what kind of data you want to collect. So based on that, you can define the SACL steps in a simple term, the rules that define the quality criteria that you want to enforce when you read the sensor data that must satisfy. And if it's invalidate, you don't collect. If it's according to your standard or the criteria, then you receive the data. And that's already having a quality data is already beneficial because it's not just you are getting IoT data, you are using those data in building machine learning or deep learning systems. So the quality of data has an impact on the quality of your predictions as well. So the quality of input has impact on quality of output.
Garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
Um, are there any are there any parting words for people that are doing research in this space, and if they'd like to get in touch with you?
I'd be happy to answer anything now, later, anytime you can reach me out. I think if you check the Care Nepal website, there's a contact, or you can reach out to me via LinkedIn. That's perfectly fine. Uh, I'm happy to help.
And last question, out of pure curiosity,
Mhm.
what insights did you gather from the work that you did in research and also in the field of autonomous vehicles?
Okay, insights in what case?
Like anything interesting of like how they engage with the internet, what kind of data they share, and then
Yeah. Uh,
like
okay, so
use cases that can be used in other sectors.
mhm. Okay, I see. For example, the sensors that are being used in autonomous vehicle, the data that the way that we gather the data, that's applicable to all. I think many different sectors like agriculture. Yeah, for example, in autonomous vehicle, you use all those camera, lidar. You can also use those things in agricultural domain, remote sensing domain, and the other insights that I gather is like how you do research and how do you deal with the problems. That's very transferable because even if you work in different field, because when you work in different field, the kind of work that you do there is okay, it's there, but what you are also gaining is the problem solving abilities. That's a transferable skills. Those are the insights that I got and how to deal with the problem. So the suggestion here is try not to accomplish things all at once. Break it down into smaller pieces and do. because sometimes what seems simple gets more complex, and what looks very complex, you do it in very like easy manner.
Well, Tech Raj, I really appreciated you having given us some insight into the very complicated and ever changing world of data privacy, GDPR, and responsible, trustworthy distributed systems. Um, I think we all have to just put on our seat belts and see what the hell is going to happen in the next year. Things are
Good
changing so
things will
fast.
happen.
Huh?
Good things will happen. People are working to make things good. So just because some things like their side effect doesn't mean you stop using medicine, you improve uh, the medicine. So
We should just be ready to handle the
mhm,
crisis
yeah.
as they come.
Yeah.
Well, um, let me just stop recording.